Reverend Motley. So we've had the opportunity to see you several times on TV. We've heard your name mentioned on radio. Can you tell me what are some of your most memorable moments within those professional organizations that you belong to, and even within the community?
Okay, yes. I will. There are many that stand out as it relates to my social, and that the Lindsay Street congregation gave me the privilege to be very outspoken. There was never any criticism whatsoever of my outspokenness as it related to and relates to the prophetic ministry of my 40 plus year tenure at Lindsay Street. It would be ministerial malpractice for any pastor to be, no judgment whatsoever upon any pastor's notions of what their particular callings are and the priorities of their ministries. It's none of mine. It's not for me to comment on, but in my assessment, from my perspective, from my vantage point as a pastor, to pastor in the English Avenue community, wants a very thriving community, working class community of persons who own their homes. So many of them work for Southern Railroad, work for over in the Marietta industrial area, all over the city of Atlanta. But it was certainly that community that bordered Bankhead, and on the other side of Bankhead, that whole industrial complex of warehouses and Southern Railroad businesses, and all where cargo would be unloaded and loaded for trains to go to and fro. Atlanta being a transportation hub, of course, and that particular identity magnifying itself, to be sure, before and especially after the Civil War and the turn of the century, and so forth and so on. A great munitions town of both manufacturing munitions as well as transporting them. Atlanta played a tremendous role in that. And so the English Avenue community, more so than Vine City community, plugged into that whole working class industrial complex over there. And so how in the world can you pastor here, particularly when some of that when the community was in its finest, at its finest hour, with English Avenue School, just at its height in terms of with Dr. Hawk and those who were before him as principal over there. And the community was a very thriving community. And then low-income apartments were built, and some drug activity and all the rest of it came to pass in the community. And in some ways, the community fell on hard times. And then the school board decided to take English Avenue School out of the community. What a terrible effect that had. What is a community without a school? Is it still a community? Yes, it is, but it's not a thriving community. And so to not speak about the crisis of persons who become addicted, to do nothing about the unemployment, to say nothing about the redlining and about the injustices of institutionalized racism. The Atlanta brand of it is to be and to come to church, sing, pray, and shout, and say nothing about the conditions, do nothing about the conditions, malpractice for any pastor, for the insensitivity, for the misunderstanding of what the gospel is, who the gospel is. That person from Nazareth said these words, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he hath anointed me to preach good news to the poor." Then he said this, "to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, the opening of the eyes of the blind." These are the words that Jesus said to John the Baptist when he had the doubts in his mind about the blind. He said, "Go back and tell John that the blind see, the lame walk, the dumb talk, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them." That same declaration of the mission, of his messianic mission, he repeated to John to reassure him that he was indeed the Messiah. And so, any pastor in a city or suburbs, urban or agrarian, who does not put the needs of the marginalized and the oppressed at the center of their ministry is committing malpractice as a pastor, as a preacher. And so the congregation, of course, is the pastor's first priority, to preach, feed the sheep, feed the flock of God. But the ministry of that church, of that pastor, has to focus itself on Matthew 25. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? Out of doors, did you let me in? When did you see me like that, Lord? Inasmuch, Jesus said, as you have done it unto the least of these, my little ones, you've done it unto me. And so he identifies completely with the poor. He didn't say, "I'd appreciate it if you would help them out." He said, "No, what you do for them, you do for me." I'm completely identified with him, because he did say, "Foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." And so, perhaps the most, I would say, maybe socially speaking, the high point, the thing that, I'm trying to chronicle even now, the chapters of, if you will, the different periods of those 40, going on 2 years, when Katherine Johnston her life was taken in the community. And the Lindsay Street Baptist Church stepped up to the plate. And there was a vigil down on Neal Street after the announcement that she had been shot dead, this 92-year-old woman, Katherine Johnston, in a no-knock, in Atlanta Police Department serving a no-knock warrant. And I joined that vigil, and the joining of that vigil had a ripple effect that we are still to this day experiencing the effects of here at the Lindsay Street Baptist Church. The mass meeting that took place in this sanctuary, that was broadcast all over the world, of the community's response to the killing of a grandmother in the community. Was she a grandmother? Did she have children and grandchildren? No, she did not. But she was a grandmother figure. And she was well known in the community, and the death, the obscenity of her untimely death, even at the age of 92, you die of natural causes. You just sleep on away one of those nights. But not the case with Miss Catherine Johnston. A member of Lindsay Street? No. A member of any church we don't know of one. She lived in Philadelphia for many years and moved back to Atlanta, a native of Social Circle, Georgia. But her death had the effect of shaking this city to her foundation. And Mayor Shirley Franklin, Police Chief Pendleton, other city officials at that time, Michael Julian Bond, Abel Mabel Thomas, Senator Vincent Ford, Markel Hutchins was the first preacher on the scene at that time. And I was asked at that vigil to give a prayer right in front of Catherine, 933 Neal Street. Give a prayer, I offered a prayer. Will you host a meeting, a community meeting, Pastor Motley, at Lindsay Street? Absolutely, we will host it, I said. And Lindsay Street responded. This church was filled to capacity. Reporters, I sat right there and talked with a reporter from New York. There were reporters from all over the country. Mayor Franklin was sitting right there. Pendleton, chief, right there. And we calmed, by the grace of God in his presence, that crowd and this community that would have otherwise broke out in riots. I don't know. But thank God that Lindsay Street opened her doors so that the community, this is a community church with a community ministry. So many of the members of Lindsay Street grew up in this community, born in this community, grew up in this community. So many, I don't even want to start calling names. I miss somebody. I will, because Gray's right down the street. And he was the planning director, Deacon Robert Gray, down there at the City Hall, who blessed us with his work down there across the years. And so I would say the hosting of that meeting was a turning point in the ministry of the Lindsay Street Baptist Church. When we got involved, and that taught me a lesson, it is the responsibility of the church to respond in love, in compassion, in a call for justice, in a call for equality, and what Dr. King would call the establishing of the beloved community. Jesus would call it the kingdom of heaven. And it is our responsibility. And because we got involved, it launched an even deeper and broader ministry for me in representing this church and community. And I began work in organizations. We established the English Avenue Community Development Corporation. I worked with Vine City Housing Ministry, Reverend W.L. Cottrell, who was a prophet of Van City, I called him. I call him Batman, I'm Robin. And we just, our voices was heard all over this city, and your question implied so many times on the news. We were on the news in our protest down at City Hall, our protesting of the stadium that stands over there now, not protesting it being built. We didn't have any problem with it being built. We felt like by it being built and the impact that stadium would have on this community, we wanted a benefits agreement from the city. And we asked for one and never got it to the mayor, with the mayor at that time, Mr. Kasim Reed. We didn't get that agreement with him or the city council at that time. And it out of that spun a whole different insight and ministry, which turned me into my prophetic voice, not only against the white power structure, but against the black power structure. And against not only racism, but classism. Because there are those, even within our own race, within our own ethnic group, who feel that they are above and beyond the people of English Avenue, the men and women who are working class, the working class poor, and the unemployed poor, those who are under bridges, those who sleep in abandoned houses. They refer to them as those people, when in all actuality, if they answer the questions truthfully, they're our people. They're their cousins and uncles and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles who are on the streets of our city. Ministry started, and so that was a great event. I could go on and on. That was a great event, that big meeting. And from that, there was a gentleman who was touched when we were mentioned on the 6 o'clock news. His name was Mr. John Gordon, a very successful European-American businessman, buckhead, very wealthy. He joined hands with her. With us. We became great friends, still are great friends. And he has a home here now and one in Florida. And I don't see him quite as much, but what a ministry together we as partners. And he formed the Friends of English Avenue, and the house that we own across the street, that we own to this day. He took that as the offices, the suite of offices that house the Friends of English Avenue. We have 2 gardens in the community, 2 community gardens that the community loves, that they respond to and love. They're free to go and get vegetables. They do so, but they do it delicately. They do it lovingly. It's something about gardens that humanize people. Even those tough guys, they move gingerly through the garden, get them something when they want. Okay, I can go on and on, but whatever else you want, ask Dr. Dale.